Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm running down my top 10 cooperative games I prefer to play multiplayer. This is a bit of a follow-up video to my previous top 10 cooperative games I prefer solo. If you haven't seen that video, go back and watch it. This is just a quick little follow-up to that. Now obviously on this list, I am not including cooperative games that can't or shouldn't be played solo. Games like The Crew, The Mind, Codenames Duet, Only One, and So Clover, to name a few. And something I probably should have mentioned in the previous video, most cooperative games, I simply don't have a preference whether I play solo or multiplayer. They play equally great both ways. For example, my favorite solo game is Robinson Crusoe, but it wasn't on the previous list because it plays equally well multiplayer. These lists are just for games where I have a particular preference. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in. Number 10 is Daybreak. This is a fantastic solo game, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. Just because it's on this list doesn't mean that it's not a great solo game. In fact, some of these are some of my favorite solo games. I just personally prefer Daybreak at 2, or even 3, because I really like the simultaneous gameplay. If you don't know about Daybreak, I have done a full solo playthrough on the channel, so you can go check that out. But it's a game where the players play like superpowers that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint, trying to convert dirty energy into clean energy, reduce the amount of carbon that you're putting into the atmosphere, and it's all done through card play. You essentially have these 5 columns of cards, and you're going to be playing cards to those columns. And whichever card is on top of those columns, you can use the special ability of that card. And a lot of times they require icons which you have on the previous cards that you've played to that column. So you're engine building these separate columns, trying to pull off these combos, and the timing of how you put stuff down really matters. But what's great is that all the players are kind of playing this little game simultaneously. We're not taking turns. So I think that's a whole aspect of the game that just, takes it up to the next level, which is missing when you're playing the solo game. With 2 or 3 players, it really shines. Really fantastic game. That's my number 10, Daybreak. Number 9 is Lands of Galzyr. This is another one where I've done a full solo playthrough, so go check that out. And again, this is a fantastic solo game, but I think it really shines with 2 players. And it's because this game is really all about the story. You're going to be taking your little animal creature into this really cute, fun world, exploring, having these adventures, these quests, trying to complete these goals. You'll be experiencing a lot of story, making some, like choose your own adventure kind of decisions. But it's all very low stakes. And I just find it more enjoyable to experience those stories with somebody else. And it works great with 2 because, each player is controlling their own character. And so you get twice as much story. And you can, read the passages to each other and, make the decisions and experience it together. I think personally, when I play solo, I want to have a little bit more of a puzzly experience. I want to have a little bit more strategic depth, even if it's a lighter game. I think this one's perfect for sort of a more casual 2-player experience where you can just have fun and explore and read the stories. So there you go. That's number 9, Lands of Galzyr. Number 8 is Marvel United X-Men. But really, this applies to the entire Marvel United franchise. I really love this one at 3 because I think 3 heroes is the sweet spot for this game. 2 is fine, but I just really love it with 3 heroes. And of course, you can play with 3 heroes solo. That works as well, but it's great to have your own hero. Every hero has their own unique deck of action cards. And the trick with this game is, you play a card and you get to activate the sort of action icons that are on it, as well as the icons that are on the previously played card. So when you play a card, you're not just playing for yourself, but you're setting up the next person. That very simple idea adds a lot of cooperation to this game. It really feels like you're cooperating with each other. That's fantastic, and it's just so satisfying with other players. Also, the game is very simple and quick. although there's a ton of stuff for it. I have like a fraction of all the stuff that's available out there for this, and I'll still probably never play as much as I have. But at its heart, it's a very simple game where you're just moving around. You have these 6 locations that are in a circle, and they have powers on them. You move around, you fight some goons and some minions, and eventually fight off a big boss. And it plays so quickly, just in like 30 to 45 minutes. Just a great medium weight cooperative game. And with 3 players, it's one of the first ones that I think about. There you go. That's number 8, Marvel United X-Men. Number 7 is Gloomhaven. Now, Gloomhaven is one of my favorite games of all time, and it's one of my favorite solo games of all time. I've played a ton of solo Gloomhaven, and I love it, but I've also played a ton of 2-player Gloomhaven. Personally, I just prefer it at 2. And this is going to be a reoccurring theme here, but you have to control 2 characters. If I remember correctly, I always have controlled 2 characters when I played solo. And, you have each character with their own unique deck. And a big part of the game is managing that deck, puzzling out how to play the 2 cards, activating, the top ability on one card, the bottom ability on another, using that to, get through the dungeon and complete the goal before you run out of cards or run out of health. That's such a fun puzzle. And I prefer to just concentrate on one character rather than have to sort of split my brain in 2 and keep passing off between 2 different characters. It's not that it's hard to manage that, it's not, but I personally just prefer to have that focus and be able to really dig into my character. And it makes for fun cooperative moments to sort of discuss, what you're going to do. And there's a lot of fun moments like that, which elevate the puzzle a little bit. But again, I would never turn down a solo game of Gloomhaven if that's what I was in the mood for. That's my number 7. Number 6 is Primal: The Awakening. Now, I love Primal, and I've done a bunch of videos now. I have a full solo playthrough where I teach the game, and then I've also have another playthrough where I go through the first challenge scenario, Trial by Fire. So 2 solo videos for you to check out on Primal, and I have a 3rd one coming up. So obviously I love the game solo, but it is so good at 2. And again, pretty much everything I said about Gloomhaven applies here. You have to play with 2 characters, and each character is fairly involved. They have their own unique deck, all their own unique equipment. There's plenty of special abilities and little things to keep track of. And so having to split your brain in 2 and control both of them, again, is very doable, but it's just, I prefer when I can just focus on one character. And adding to that slightly is this assist feature where certain cards in your hand you can play out of turn to sort of help the other player on their turn. And there's even cards that have different triggers, like when this happens, if the other player takes damage or something, you can play this to prevent it, things like that. And when you're playing solo, it's very easy to get sort of caught up in the deck of the character that you're playing at that moment and not really thinking about, oh, what cards does the other character have that might help me in this moment? So I'm constantly missing out on opportunities to play assists or play those cards. Again, that's mitigated when you play with 2, and it just flows a little better. It's a little easier for me personally. Either way, though, absolutely fantastic game. Highly recommend it. Check out those playthroughs. That's Primal: The Awakening, my number 6. Number 5 is Slay the Spire, the board game. Yes, this is a very faithful reproduction of the video game in board game form. Again, I have a full solo playthrough, so you can go check that out. Just like the video game, this is a deck building game where you are going through a dungeon, facing different creatures and things, and then you're constantly crafting your deck as you go. You'll also be collecting money to get potions and relics and different things like that. And this is a case where actually you don't need to play multiple characters in order to play solo. In fact, the video game is only solo. And so, yeah, you can totally go through the dungeon with just your one character, and it works great. It's fantastic. But part of the charm of the board game and what makes it different from the video game is that you can play with up to 4 players. The rules are basically the same. It's just that each player will have their own sort of encounter with a creature, like in their row, and the players can attack any of the creatures, but the creatures will just attack the player that's in their row. So you can cooperate to take out like a particular bad enemy, or if one of the characters is low on health, you can kind of clear their row out. And then there's some enemies that will attack everybody in every row. It just works so well as a multiplayer game on the table. The fact that they were able to translate the video game that well to a multiplayer experience is just fantastic. So if I had my preference, I'd want to play Slay the Spire, the board game, with 2 or 3 people, but it's also fantastic solo. So there you go. Number 5, Slay the Spire, the board game. Number 4 is Return to Dark Tower. I did a solo playthrough of this one a long time ago, early on in the history of the channel. And this is one where I actually found the solo mode to be a little disappointing at the time. This is a game that feels like it was balanced for 4 players. And not surprisingly, that is by far the best player count. Part of the problem is the board, which is kind of circular, is divided into quadrants. And each player kind of has a home quadrant. And as you play, you're kind of moving around to different locations, but different things are popping up all over the board. You know, you have this massive mechanical tower where you're dropping skulls into, and it's sort of spinning around and spitting those skulls out into the different quadrants. And when you have 4 players, they can each sort of look after their quadrants a little bit, make sure things don't get too bad. You can come over and help, but it just balances nicely and works perfectly. And it makes the game a lot harder. When you're playing solo, again, at least back then in the early days, the game was just entirely too easy. The balance was all messed up. I did a video about it. Now, it's entirely possible that that has been fixed at this point. But I had such a bad experience with the solo after like 4, 5, 6 games. I can't even remember. Yeah, I haven't gone back to it solo. This is a cooperative game where the multiplayer just shines, and I think I'm kind of happy to keep it as sort of a nice medium weight cooperative game for 4 players, if at all possible. So there you go. That's number 4, Return to Dark Tower. Number 3 is Marvel Champions. Now, I know I'm going to get a bunch of grief for this. This is one of the most beloved solo games out there. And again, it's a great solo game. I completely understand why it's such a popular solo game. I've played it solo quite a bit. This is really a personal choice as much as anything, because I just personally prefer it so much more at 2. I really want to have 2 heroes out there when I play this game. And there's no way I'm going to run both heroes as a solo game. So anytime I've played it solo, I've only played with 1 hero. And it works great. You know, I'm not saying that it doesn't work well with just 1 hero, but man, there just feels like there's something missing. I just have a much better time when there's 2 heroes and we can have the heroes sort of complement each other. The game just feels so much more complete as a 2-player cooperative experience. If I'm playing solo, I'd rather play something like Arkham Horror, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I know, but again, this is a very personal pick. I wish I could justify it better, but it's just that's just how it is. So that's my number 3, Marvel Champions. Number 2 is Spirit Island. Okay, now I'm really going to get a lot of abusive comments. I love Spirit Island. It's like a top 100 game for me, but I don't really enjoy the one spirit game. Every time I've played with just one spirit, it just feels like too much is missing. I'm missing out on a lot of the interesting dynamics. The map is so small. It just doesn't do it for me. But then when I try to play 2 spirits solo, I find that experience overwhelming. And again, I've talked about it with Gloomhaven and Primal. I don't love splitting my focus between 2 characters when each character has a lot going on. Spirit Island is maybe the extreme example of that. There's just too much thought that goes into each spirit's actions and their moves. I really don't enjoy controlling two characters. And so the two-player game is the best of both worlds. You get to have all the interesting dynamics with the two different spirits. You get to have the nice larger map, but you only have to focus on one spirit and coming up with all the intricate plans for just that spirit. And part of the problem with that is that this is a heavier cooperative game, and it's hard for me to find someone who wants to play a cooperative game that's this heavy. A lot of the cooperative games that I play multiplayer are lighter or medium weight. A lot of my friends who enjoy heavier games don't necessarily want to play a cooperative game. So Spirit Island fits in this sort of weird middle ground where it would be the perfect solo game for me if I enjoyed playing two spirits more. But I can totally understand why it's such a popular solo game. So there you go. That's my number 2, Spirit Island. And my number 1 is Ghost Stories. This should be far less controversial. Ghost Stories is a 4-player game through and through. This is like a tower defense game where you're operating on this 3x3 grid, and on all 4 sides you have these ghosts that are coming in, attacking this village. And when you don't have all 4 monks in play, the rules get a little screwy. I don't really enjoy the way that they deal with that. Anytime I play solo, I'll always play with all 4 monks in play, and I'm just controlling all of them. And that's very doable, but it's nowhere near as much fun as having 4 players, each controlling one of the monks, making decisions for their monk, controlling sort of their side of the board, and, losing together. It's just so much more fun. Because this is a brutal game and you will lose. Yeah, I personally think this is one of the best 4-player cooperative games out there. It just works so great with 4 players. So there you have it, my number 1, Ghost Stories. And those are my top 10 cooperative games that I prefer to play multiplayer. Are there any games that I missed? Now, one you might be thinking about is Nemesis. You can put it down here as an honorable mention. I didn't include it on the list because most of the time, the main way that you want to play Nemesis is as a competitive game. I love solo Nemesis, but I love it about the same as cooperative Nemesis. But clearly, the competitive multiplayer game is where it's at, so it didn't quite fit on this list. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. Check out all of our top 10 lists and playthrough videos that we've done. I'd really appreciate the support. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.